The airport was alive with the energy of people rushing to their destinations. Travelers wheeled suitcases across gleaming floors. Announcements echoed over the loudspeakers, and the scent of fresh coffee from nearby kiosks mingled with the faint aroma of jet fuel. Amid the bustle, Sophia held tightly to Ethan's small hand as they navigated the check-in line. "Mom, look." Ethan's voice was brimming with excitement as he pointed toward a giant glass window that overlooked the runway. Outside, planes of all sizes sat on the tarmac, their sleek bodies gleaming under the morning sun. "That one is huge. Is that our plane?" Sophia smiled, her heart swelling at her son's enthusiasm. His bright blue eyes sparkled as he bounced on the balls of his feet, clutching a small, stuffed dinosaur to his chest. "Not that one, buddy," she said, ruffling his sandy blonde hair. "But ours will be just as big. I promise." Ethan nodded, satisfied with her answer. He clutched her hand tighter as they inched forward in line. Sophia glanced at the ticket counter ahead, where a family with 2 toddlers was struggling to wrangle their belongings. She adjusted the strap of her carry-on bag and gave Ethan a reassuring squeeze. This trip meant everything to her. It wasn't just about the destination, it was about giving Ethan a chance to explore, to see the world beyond their small apartment and daily routine. It was also a chance for Sophia to breathe, to escape the weight of her responsibilities for just a few days. She had saved for months, cutting corners where she could, so she could afford the tickets and hotel. Now, as the reality of their journey set in, she felt both excitement and nervousness bubbling within her. Next in line, the agent called, and Sophia stepped forward, her grip on Ethan's hand firm. She handed over their tickets and passports, offering the agent a polite smile. The agent glanced at Ethan, then at Sophia, his expression neutral. "2 tickets for the flight to Los Angeles?" he asked. "Yes, that's correct," Sophia replied, her voice steady. The agent nodded, typing something into his computer. After a moment, he handed back their documents and gestured toward the security checkpoint. "Enjoy your flight." "Thank you," Sophia said, taking Ethan's hand again. "Come on, buddy, let's go find our gate." As they moved through security, Ethan's curiosity was endless. He peppered her with questions about the conveyor belts, the metal detectors, and why he had to take off his shoes. Sophia answered patiently, her own anxiety softening in the face of his wonder. "Do you think they'll have cookies on the plane?" Ethan asked as they put their shoes back on. "Maybe," Sophia said with a laugh. "But we packed snacks just in case." Ethan grinned, holding up the corner of his backpack as if to show her he hadn't forgotten. Inside was an assortment of treats and toys Sophia had carefully chosen to keep him occupied during the flight. His dinosaur, however, seemed to be his favorite companion. They found their gate with time to spare, and Sophia let Ethan pick a seat by the window. He pressed his nose to the glass, watching the planes taxiing on the runway. The hum of his excitement made her smile, and she took a moment to relax, letting the weight of her bag slip off her shoulder. "Mom, do you think our plane is magic?" Ethan asked suddenly. "Magic?" Sophia raised an eyebrow. "What makes you say that?" "Well," he said thoughtfully, "it's going to fly us through the sky, like a superhero. That's kind of like magic." Sophia chuckled. "You're right, it is kind of like magic." As they sat together, Sophia felt a surge of gratitude for this moment. She watched Ethan's face, illuminated by the sunlight streaming through the window, and thought about how far they had come. Adopting Ethan 2 years ago had been the most challenging and rewarding decision of her life. He had been a scared, quiet little boy when she first met him, his trust broken by circumstances she couldn't bear to dwell on. Now, he was a bright, curious 6-year-old who filled her days with laughter and purpose. Flight 237 to Los Angeles. Now boarding first class. The announcement crackled over the speakers. "That's us," Sophia said, standing and adjusting her bag. "Ready, buddy?" Ethan jumped up, his excitement renewed. "Ready." As they walked to the boarding gate, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. She glanced over her shoulder, but the crowd behind them seemed preoccupied with their own travels. Shaking off the feeling, she handed their tickets to the gate agent and led Ethan down the jet bridge. The plane loomed ahead of them, its metal surface glinting in the sunlight. Ethan's steps quickened as they approached the door, and Sophia tightened her grip on his hand. Their adventure was just beginning. Sophia and Ethan stepped onto the plane, greeted by the cool, recycled air and the faint hum of the engines. The flight attendant at the door smiled, her eyes flicking briefly to Ethan before nodding. "Welcome aboard," she said, her tone pleasant but hurried. "Thanks," Sophia replied, guiding Ethan down the aisle toward their seats in first class. The cabin was bright and spacious, a stark contrast to the coach sections Sophia was used to. She had splurged on these tickets, wanting to give Ethan an experience that would feel special, a memory he could carry with him forever. "Wow," Ethan whispered as they reached their row. "It's so big, Mom." Sophia smiled as she helped him into his window seat. "Pretty nice, huh? You'll have lots of room to stretch your legs." Ethan immediately leaned toward the window, his small hands pressed against the armrests as he stared out at the bustling runway. Sophia stowed their carry-on bags in the overhead compartment and settled into the seat beside him. "Do you think we'll see clouds?" Ethan asked, his voice bubbling with curiosity. "Definitely," Sophia said. "We'll be flying right through them." Ethan's eyes widened, and he let out a little gasp of excitement. His joy was contagious, and Sophia found herself relaxing. She adjusted her seatbelt, stealing glances at her son as he marveled at every detail of the plane. Passengers filed past, their chatter blending with the quiet hum of pre-flight preparations. Sophia noticed the occasional glance from others, some curious, others indifferent, but she ignored them. She was used to the stares, the unspoken questions. Ethan's sandy hair and pale skin contrasted with her own darker complexion, a fact that often prompted people to wonder about their connection. "Can I look out the window the whole time?" Ethan asked, already leaning forward. "As long as you don't press your face too hard on the glass," Sophia said with a laugh. "We don't want any smudges." Ethan giggled, his eyes glued to the scene outside. Sophia took a moment to scan the cabin. The other passengers in first class were settling in, chatting quietly or scrolling on their phones. The atmosphere felt calm, and Sophia allowed herself to hope the flight would remain that way. "Excuse me, ma'am." A flight attendant appeared at their row, her polished appearance and crisp uniform exuding professionalism. Her smile seemed forced as her gaze lingered on Sophia and then flicked to Ethan. "Do you need anything before we take off?" "We're fine, thank you," Sophia said, keeping her tone polite. The flight attendant nodded but hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied Ethan. "Is he traveling with you?" Sophia's stomach tightened. "Yes," she said, her voice firm. "He's my son." There was a moment of silence, and then the flight attendant's expression shifted. It wasn't overt, but Sophia caught it, a subtle flicker of doubt, quickly masked by a professional smile. "All right, let me know if you need anything," the woman said before moving on. Sophia's grip on the armrest tightened. She took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over her. This was supposed to be a happy trip, a chance for them to bond and explore together. She wasn't going to let a stranger's assumptions ruin that. "Mom?" Ethan's voice pulled her back. "When are we going to fly?" "Soon, sweetheart," Sophia said, forcing a smile. "We just have to wait for everyone to get on board." Ethan nodded. "Content for now." He pressed his face against the window again, watching as a baggage cart rolled past. Sophia reached over and smoothed his hair, her fingers lingering on the soft strands. She would protect him from everything she could, even if that meant keeping her own feelings bottled up. The plane filled quickly, and soon the cabin crew began their pre-flight announcements. Ethan watched with wide eyes as the safety demonstration played on the screens in front of them. Sophia kept her focus on him, letting his excitement drown out her lingering discomfort. When the engines roared to life and the plane began to taxi, Ethan's hand shot out to grab hers. "We're moving," he exclaimed, his voice filled with awe. Sophia laughed softly. "That's right, we'll be in the sky before you know it." As the plane accelerated down the runway and lifted off, Ethan's wonder reached its peak. He pointed out the shrinking landscape below, his voice a steady stream of questions and observations. Sophia leaned close, answering him patiently and soaking in his joy. For a while, everything felt perfect. The hum of the engines, the gentle sway of the plane, and Ethan's laughter created a cocoon of comfort. Sophia let herself relax, her earlier tension slipping away. But then, as she helped Ethan unbuckle his seatbelt so he could stretch, she noticed the same flight attendant returning down the aisle. Her expression was neutral, but her gaze lingered on Sophia and Ethan again. and the knot in Sophia's stomach tightened. "Excuse me, ma'am," the flight attendant said, her voice low. "Can I ask you a question?" Sophia turned, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Of course." The attendant hesitated, glancing at Ethan, who was now happily flipping through the in-flight entertainment options. "Are you his biological mother?" she asked, her tone clinical but unmistakably sharp. Sophia's breath caught, and her chest tightened. She felt the weight of the question like a blow, the implication hanging heavily in the air. Forcing herself to stay calm, she replied, "No, I'm his adoptive mother. Is there a problem?" The flight attendant shifted on her feet, her gaze darting around as if searching for support. "Not at all," she said quickly. "We just have to ensure everything is in order when traveling with minors." Sophia clenched her jaw. "Everything is in order. I have all the necessary documents. If that's what you're asking." The attendant nodded, her face flushing slightly. "Thank you for understanding, ma'am," she mumbled before walking away. Sophia's hands were trembling as she adjusted Ethan's seatbelt. She felt the eyes of nearby passengers on her, the whispers just out of earshot. Her heart ached, but she swallowed the lump in her throat and focused on Ethan, who was blissfully unaware of the exchange. "Mom, can I have some apple juice?" Ethan asked, his voice bright. Sophia smiled, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Of course, baby. Let me get it for you." She raised her hand to signal another flight attendant, determined to push through the unease and make this flight memorable for all the right reasons. Sophia managed to flag down another flight attendant, a younger woman with a warm smile and a more approachable demeanor. "Hi, could I get an apple juice for my son, please?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying a polite firmness. "Of course," the attendant replied with a smile. "I'll be right back." Sophia glanced at Ethan, who was now fiddling with the buttons on his in-flight screen, utterly engrossed in the choices. His small hand gripped his stuffed dinosaur, and the sight of him so content softened the tension in her chest. Moments later, the young flight attendant returned with a small carton of apple juice and a plastic cup. "Here you go, sweetheart," she said, crouching slightly to hand the drink to Ethan. She then looked at Sophia, her expression kind but fleetingly curious. Before moving on, Sophia sighed inwardly, grateful for the lack of interrogation this time. Ethan grinned at her as he sipped his juice, a bit spilling onto his chin. "This is the best apple juice ever," he declared, his joy undiminished by the small mess. "I'm glad you like it," Sophia said, dabbing at his chin with a napkin. For a moment, the knot in her stomach loosened, and she allowed herself to bask in Ethan's unfiltered happiness. But the calm didn't last. The senior flight attendant, the one who had questioned her earlier, returned, her posture stiff, and her expression unreadable. She stopped at their row and leaned down slightly, lowering her voice. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you again." Sophia's muscles tensed. She placed a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. "What is it now?" she asked, her tone sharp but controlled. The flight attendant hesitated, glancing at Ethan before meeting Sophia's eyes. "A passenger has raised concerns about the nature of your relationship with the child." Sophia felt her heart plummet, the words hitting her like a physical blow. "Concerns?" she repeated, her voice low and incredulous. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, ma'am," the attendant replied, her tone carefully measured. "We're required to ensure the safety of all children on board." Ethan, sensing the tension in Sophia's voice, looked up at her with wide eyes. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. Sophia's heart ached at the fear in his voice. She forced a smile, brushing her fingers through his hair. "Nothing, sweetheart. Everything's fine." She turned back to the attendant, her voice firm but quiet. "This is my son. I have documentation to prove it if you need it. But I will not tolerate being questioned like this in front of him." The attendant straightened, her expression wavering slightly. "It's just procedure, ma'am," she said before walking away. Sophia sat back, her hand trembling as she reached for her bag. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photos, finding the ones she knew she might need. Pictures of her and Ethan at the park, baking cookies, celebrating his last birthday. She stared at the images, her chest tightening with a mix of love and frustration. These photos were proof of their bond, but she hated that she even had to consider showing them to strangers. "Mom," Ethan whispered, his small hand tugging at her sleeve. "Did I do something wrong?" Sophia's heart broke. She turned to him, cupping his cheek gently. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Some people just don't understand. But it's not your fault. Okay?" Ethan nodded slowly, but the confusion and unease lingered in his eyes. He looked down at his dinosaur, hugging it tightly. The minutes dragged by, the hum of the engines a background noise to the turmoil in Sophia's mind. She could feel the eyes of other passengers on her, their whispers barely audible but cutting all the same. Across the aisle, an older woman leaned toward her companion, her voice carrying just enough for Sophia to hear. "Do you think she's telling the truth?" the woman muttered. "They don't look alike at all." Sophia clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to stand up, to confront the whispers and judgment, but she couldn't risk creating a scene. Not for her own sake, but for Ethan's. A sudden jolt of turbulence shook the plane, and the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, instructing everyone to fasten their seatbelts. Sophia helped Ethan secure his buckle, her hands moving automatically despite the chaos in her mind. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly, "are we going to be okay?" Sophia leaned close, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Of course we are, sweetheart. I'm right here." The turbulence subsided, and the cabin fell into an uneasy quiet. Sophia leaned back in her seat, her arm around Ethan's small shoulders. She could feel the weight of the flight attendant's words, the stares, the whispers pressing down on her. But she also felt Ethan's warmth, his trust in her, and it gave her the strength to hold her head high. She wasn't going to let them break her. Sophia's resolve hardened as the minutes ticked by. Ethan leaned against her, sipping his apple juice, seemingly lost in his own world again. But Sophia could sense the tension lingering beneath his small, innocent questions about the flight. The cabin had grown quieter as the plane leveled off. The usual hum of engines filled the air, punctuated by the occasional cough or sound of a page turning. Sophia tried to lose herself in the peaceful rhythm of the flight. But the weight of judgment still lingered. Then, the senior flight attendant returned. Sophia had seen her making rounds in the cabin, speaking to a few passengers in low tones. Her sharp gaze occasionally darted toward Sophia and Ethan, and now she was heading straight for their row. Sophia braced herself, her fingers tightening on the armrest. "Ma'am," the attendant began, her voice lower than before, but still laced with authority. "I need to ask you to provide identification and proof of guardianship for the child." Sophia blinked, momentarily stunned. "Are you serious?" she asked, keeping her voice calm but firm. The attendant glanced around as if to gauge the reactions of nearby passengers. Some were watching openly, others pretending to mind their own business. "Yes, ma'am, I'm afraid it's necessary. Several passengers have expressed concern." Ethan looked up, his confusion evident. "Mom, why do they need to see that? I thought we already gave them our tickets." Sophia's heart ached at his words. She took a deep breath, leaning close to him. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'll handle this." Turning to the flight attendant, she spoke with measured precision. "I'm Ethan's legal mother. I have all the documentation you could possibly need. But this feels unnecessary and intrusive. I've already answered your questions once. Ma'am, we just need to verify." Sophia cut her off, her voice low but steady. "Verify what? That I love my son? That I've cared for him since the day I adopted him? Do you ask every parent on this flight to prove their relationship? Or is this just for me?" The flight attendant's cheeks flushed. "Ma'am, please understand, this is about ensuring the child's safety. His safety isn't in question." Sophia replied sharply. "What is in question is why you're singling us out. My son and I boarded this flight like everyone else. We're here to enjoy our trip, not to be interrogated." The attendant hesitated, and for a moment, Sophia thought she might back down. But then, a voice from the row ahead broke the tense silence. "Maybe if you cooperated, this wouldn't be happening," said a man in his 40s, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt. He turned in his seat to face her, his expression dripping with judgment. "She's just doing her job." Sophia's pulse quickened. She could feel her temper rising, but she kept her voice steady. "And I've done everything to cooperate. What I won't do is tolerate baseless accusations in front of my child." The man scoffed, muttering under his breath, but he turned back to face forward. Sophia's focus returned to the flight attendant, who now looked visibly uncomfortable. "I'll show you what you're asking for," Sophia said finally, pulling out her phone. But I want you to know how unacceptable this is. She scrolled to a folder labeled Family Photos and opened it. Holding up the screen, image after image of her and Ethan filled the small space. Ethan laughing as they baked cookies. Ethan sitting on her lap during story time. Ethan beaming at the camera as Sophia knelt beside him, her arms wrapped around him protectively. "This is my proof," Sophia said, her voice firm. "This is my son, and I will not let anyone question that." The flight attendant's expression faltered as she glanced at the photos. "Thank you, ma'am," she said quietly. "I'm very sorry for the inconvenience." Sophia narrowed her eyes. "You should be. You've humiliated me in front of my son and these passengers. I hope you think about that the next time you decide to question a parent." The attendant nodded awkwardly and walked away, her shoulders tense. Sophia leaned back in her seat, her hands trembling slightly as she set her phone down. She could feel Ethan's gaze on her and turned to meet his wide, curious eyes. "Mom, why did you have to show them pictures?" he asked, his voice small. Sophia stroked his hair gently, searching for the right words. "Sometimes, people don't understand things, baby. They ask questions because they're not used to seeing things that are different." "But we're not different," Ethan said, frowning. "You're my mom." Sophia's throat tightened, and she hugged him close. "You're right, sweetheart. I'm your mom, and that's all that matters. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Okay?" Ethan nodded, his small hands gripping his stuffed dinosaur tightly. "Okay, Mom." Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman leaned over, her voice quiet. "I just wanted to say, I think you handled that very well," she said, her expression kind but cautious. Sophia gave her a tight smile. "Thank you." As the woman turned back to her book, Sophia let out a long breath. She glanced around the cabin, meeting the occasional gaze before passengers quickly looked away. The tension was still there, but she could feel it beginning to dissipate. Ethan returned to his window, pointing out the clouds as the plane soared higher. Sophia rested her head against the seat, her arm draped protectively around him. They had weathered the storm, and though the unease lingered, Sophia knew they would be okay. As the plane began its descent, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their approach to Los Angeles. Ethan perked up, his face lighting with excitement. "Mom, are we almost there?" he asked, pressing his face against the window to see the city below. Sophia smiled, brushing a curl of hair away from his forehead. "Almost, sweetheart. See all those buildings down there? That's where we're going." Ethan's eyes widened as he took in the view, the sprawling city sparkling under the golden glow of the late afternoon sun. "It's so big. Do you think they have dinosaurs here?" Sophia chuckled softly. "Well, I don't think they have real ones. But maybe we can visit a museum with dinosaur bones." "Can we, Mom, please?" Ethan's enthusiasm was infectious, and Sophia couldn't help but laugh. "Of course, we can. This trip is all about having fun," she said, as the wheels touched down on the runway. Ethan clutched his stuffed dinosaur tightly, his excitement mingled with a bit of nervous energy. Sophia placed a reassuring hand on his back. "You did so well, Ethan. Wasn't that fun?" He nodded eagerly. "I liked flying, but I like being on the ground too." The plane taxied to the gate, and soon the flight attendants began preparing for disembarkation. The same senior attendant who had questioned Sophia earlier passed their row, her eyes briefly meeting Sophia's. The woman hesitated, then nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement. Sophia held her gaze for a moment before turning her attention back to Ethan. "Okay, buddy, it's time to grab your dinosaur and get going," she said, helping him gather his things. They filed off the plane with the other passengers, Ethan holding tightly to Sophia's hand as they stepped into the bustling terminal. The energy of the airport was different from the flight. It felt open, welcoming, full of possibility. Sophia inhaled deeply, the weight of the flight's tension finally beginning to lift. "Mom, look at that," Ethan exclaimed, pointing at a giant digital display showing arrival and departure times. The colorful lights and scrolling text captivated him. Sophia laughed. "It's pretty cool, huh? Come on, let's get our bags." At the baggage claim, Sophia kept Ethan close as they waited for their luggage. She couldn't help but notice a few lingering glances from other passengers who had been on the flight. But she met each gaze with quiet strength. She wouldn't let anyone diminish the joy she felt in this moment. A young woman in a bright blue dress approached, her expression warm and sincere. Excuse me, she said softly. I just wanted to say I think you handled everything really well on the plane. You're a great mom. Sophia blinked, surprised by the kind words. Thank you, she said, her voice tinged with both gratitude and weariness. The woman nodded, then moved on, leaving Sophia standing there with a small but genuine smile on her face. Mom, is this ours? Ethan asked, pointing to a suitcase circling on the carousel. Yes, it is, Sophia said, stepping forward to grab it. She ruffled Ethan's hair. You've got a good eye, buddy. They made their way out of the terminal. Stepping into the bright California sun, Ethan squinted up at her, his face breaking into a wide grin. It's so warm here. Mom, can we go to the beach? Sophia laughed, her heart swelling with love for him. Maybe tomorrow. Let's get to the hotel first. And then we'll figure out our plans. They found a taxi, and Sophia gave the driver the address of their hotel. As the car sped through the city streets, Ethan's face was glued to the window, taking in every sight. Skyscrapers loomed above them, palm trees lined the roads, and the ocean sparkled in the distance. Look, Mom, it's so big, Ethan exclaimed, pointing at a towering building. Do you think they have dinosaurs in there? Sophia chuckled. Maybe not, but I bet we'll find some at the museum. The driver glanced at them in the rearview mirror, a small smile tugging at his lips. First time in LA? He asked. Sophia nodded. First time. My son's very excited. Well, welcome, the driver said. There's a lot to see and do here. You'll have a great time. Sophia felt a sense of relief as they pulled up to the hotel. It was a sleek, modern building with tall glass windows that reflected the blue sky. She helped Ethan out of the car, thanking the driver before leading him inside. Mom, this place is fancy, Ethan whispered, his eyes wide as they entered the lobby. The polished floors gleamed, and the air smelled faintly of fresh flowers. It's pretty nice, isn't it? Sophia said, squeezing his hand. Let's get checked in. The receptionist greeted them with a smile, her gaze briefly flicking to Ethan. Welcome, checking in today? Yes, Sophia replied, handing over her reservation details. As the receptionist processed their check-in, Sophia felt a familiar flicker of unease. The woman's smile was polite, but her glance lingered just a moment too long. Sophia ignored it, focusing on Ethan, who was marveling at the decorative fountain in the center of the lobby. Here's your key, ma'am. Enjoy your stay, the receptionist said, handing Sophia a sleek plastic card. Thank you, Sophia said, taking Ethan's hand again. They made their way to the elevators and rode up to their room, Ethan bouncing on his toes in excitement. When they stepped inside, Ethan let out a little gasp. The room was spacious, with a wall of windows offering a stunning view of the city. Mom, look, he said, running to the window. I can see everything. Sophia set their bags down and joined him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. The city stretched out before them, alive with motion and light. It's beautiful, isn't it? She said softly. Ethan nodded, his face pressed to the glass. Do you think we'll see dolphins tomorrow? Sophia laughed. Maybe, but tonight, how about we get some ice cream and relax? Ethan spun around, his eyes lighting up. Yes, please. Can I get chocolate? Of course, Sophia said, ruffling his hair. You deserve it. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the large windows of their hotel room, painting everything in soft gold. Sophia stirred awake, her gaze falling on Ethan, who was still sound asleep. Clutching his stuffed dinosaur, she smiled, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. He looked so peaceful, and for a moment, the tension of the previous day seemed like a distant memory. Sophia slipped out of bed quietly, pulling back the curtains to take in the breathtaking view of the city. The streets below were already bustling with life. Today would be different. Today was about exploring, making memories, and leaving yesterday's challenges behind. Mom? Ethan's sleepy voice broke her thoughts. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. Is it time to go see the statue? Sophia turned, her heart warming at his eagerness. Good morning, buddy. Yes, we're going to the park. And we'll see the statue. Ethan's face lit up. And maybe dolphins too? Maybe, Sophia said with a laugh. First, let's get some breakfast. After a hearty breakfast at the hotel, they set out for the park. The day was warm, the sky a brilliant blue. Ethan skipped along beside Sophia, pointing at everything that caught his eye. A street performer juggling flaming torches, a brightly colored food truck, and a group of children flying kites near the park entrance. When they reached the statue, Ethan's excitement was palpable. The towering bronze figure stood in the middle of a lush green park, its presence commanding yet serene. Ethan ran ahead, craning his neck to look up at it. "Wow, Mom, it's so big," he exclaimed, his voice filled with wonder. Sophia snapped a picture, capturing the pure joy on his face. "It is big. Want to take a picture with it?" Ethan nodded enthusiastically, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Sophia crouched beside him, setting up her phone to take a selfie. The camera clicked, and the moment was frozen forever. Ethan's bright smile, the statue towering above, and Sophia's loving gaze. They spent the rest of the morning exploring the park, feeding ducks at the pond, and playing on the swings. Ethan's laughter echoed through the air, filling Sophia's heart with a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. As they left the park, they wandered into a nearby cafe for ice cream. Ethan chose chocolate, of course, while Sophia opted for vanilla. They sat by the window, watching the world go by as they enjoyed their treat. "Mom," Ethan said suddenly, his voice thoughtful, "why do some people look at us like we don't belong?" Sophia's heart tightened. She set down her spoon, meeting his curious gaze. "Well, sweetheart," she began gently, "sometimes people don't understand things that are different from what they're used to. It doesn't mean we don't belong. We do. You and I belong wherever we are. Together." Ethan nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Like how my dinosaur looks different from the others at school. But it's still the best one?" Sophia smiled, her chest swelling with pride. "Exactly like that, buddy. Different doesn't mean less. It means special." Ethan grinned, his worries melting away as he finished his ice cream. Sophia watched him, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She couldn't shield him from the world's prejudices, but she could teach him to face them with strength and confidence. That evening, they found themselves on the beach, the waves lapping at their feet as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky was a masterpiece of oranges, pinks, and purples, casting a magical glow over the water. Ethan ran ahead, his laughter mixing with the sound of the waves. He collected shells, showing each one to Sophia with uncontainable excitement. "Look, Mom, this one looks like a little boat." Sophia laughed, kneeling in the sand beside him. "It does. You're quite the explorer." As the sun sank lower, Ethan sat beside her, his small hand slipping into hers. "Mom, today was the best day ever," he said, leaning his head against her arm. Sophia wrapped her arm around him, pulling him close. "I'm glad, sweetheart. I want every day to feel like the best day for you." Ethan looked up at her, his eyes filled with trust. "Do you promise?" Sophia smiled, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I promise." Back in their hotel room, Ethan fell asleep almost instantly, his stuffed dinosaur tucked under his arm. Sophia sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. The events of the trip replayed in her mind, the stares, the questions, the whispers, but so did the joy, the laughter, and the connection she shared with her son. This trip wasn't just about exploring a new city, it was about proving to herself and to Ethan that they belonged wherever they chose to be. The world might not always be kind, but their bond was unbreakable. And that was enough. Sophia glanced back at Ethan, her heart swelling with love. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, "no matter what." Outside, the city thrummed with life, full of possibilities. Inside, Sophia felt a quiet strength settle over her. This was just the beginning of their story, and she was ready for whatever came next. They were a family, they belonged, and together, they could face anything.